When we're diagnosed with multiple sclerosis or another chronic disease, we're left in this horrible situation where it's either we follow standard of care and they don't have a cure for us, and we know that we're going to continually progress until we end up with disability, or we can go down a different path and we can work with integrative practitioners and we can try all kinds of things like changing our diet and taking a lot of supplements and doing a lot of testing and heavy metals and Lyme and Candida, and we're spending tens of thousands of dollars. Some people say hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we're still sick. And I really understand this because I work with a lot of people, but myself, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 28. And I tried a lot of things to get well. And what I realized is one critical thing is that the practitioners, even today, they really do not understand how to identify and how to treat parasites that are causing disease, causing multiple sclerosis symptoms and causing other symptoms in other diseases. So today what I'm going to share with you is I'm going to talk about the worms, the types of worms that we see in multiple sclerosis and other chronic diseases. And so these are disease-causing parasites. They cause a lot of MS symptoms. So I'm going to talk about different types of worms that have been discovered through science, but I'm also going to share with you some of the different types of worms that our students are passing and that I have passed as we recover from MS and other chronic diseases. I will be sharing with you the types of experiences of symptom improvements that we can experience when we treat them. And this is part of recovery. That's the exciting thing, is treating the root cause, which the worms are not the only cause. Parasites are the cause of MS. It's an infectious disease, but worms play a really big part. And the bigger the worms, the bigger the parasites, the bigger the symptoms they cause in our body. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha. I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. Again, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis over 35 years ago, and I'm sharing with you what I have used in order to recover and to stay healthy for 35 years. And I've had the amazing privilege to coach over at least 2,000 students or more all over the world, helping them to recover from chronic diseases like multiple sclerosis and other diseases. And we have their successes on our YouTube channel. You can go listen to them under successes under Live Disease Free. Also on our website, Live Disease Free. Take some Kleenex with you because it's pretty amazing, the successes. Like it's just miracles. That's what I would have to say, because we're told that there's nothing we can do, that we are going to progress. We should take the disease-modifying drugs, but in time we will become completely disabled because the drugs don't work, because they're not treating the root cause. So what we have learned, even just in the past 5, 6, 7 years, about the types of worms that are involved in MS is truly profound. So I've created some slides for you. I'm not going to show you the worms that we are passing because they're a little sensitive to put on YouTube. But what I do every week is I create a blog post. It's on our website, livediseasefree.com. You can go there. You can actually look at other blog posts. I've got other pictures of the types of worms that our students have been passing, roundworms and flukes. And then also they're passing tapeworms. So between this blog post that will be published in 3 or 4 days and also the past ones I have, you'll be able to get lots of pictures of what we're passing, and it's truly profound. So our students are passing hundreds of worms that they see when they are recovering from MS and other chronic diseases. So let's talk about really important research. Dr. McDonald is a very well-respected pathologist. In 2016, he discovered very small roundworms in the central nervous system of MS subjects, everyone that he tested. So these little worms are called filarial worms, and they are very small roundworms. They can infect our eyes. They can also infect our lymphatic system, our blood, our skin, our intestines, and our central nervous system. and they can cause rashes, they can cause arthritis type symptoms. They can actually change the pigmentation of your skin where you get dark or light spots. You can also have abdominal pain if they're in that area, extreme fatigue, tingling, numbness, balance issues, spasticity, weakness, and paralysis. So many symptoms that we would experience when we have multiple sclerosis or another chronic disease. So he found these small filarial worms really easily in the spinal fluid of every MS subject that he tested. So he went to a university brain bank. I don't know if it's a university, but it's a brain bank where they freeze the remains of people that have chronic diseases like MS. So these are subjects that definitely had multiple sclerosis. They died of MS. And he was able to look at their spinal fluid in their brain, and he found that in the brain, it was harder to find the worms, but in the spinal fluid, they were abundant. The worms were abundant in the spinal fluid of MS subjects, 10 out of 10. So he looked at 10 cases, and 100% of them were positive for these filarial parasites in the spinal fluid. He found adult worms, he found larva forms, that's the immature forms, he found eggs, and he found mating pairs. And he also found a lot of debris. So when you have worms living in your central nervous system, all their waste material produces a lot of debris, and it was easy to see all of that. So there were multiple forms of parasite present, not just the adult form, but also the immature forms. And also he found fertilized eggs showing embryo development inside the eggs. He also found Borrelia, which is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. That's the spirochete bacteria that I talk about. So I'm going to show you a picture of these worms where they're loaded with Borrelia. So it's not just that we get bitten by a mosquito or a tick and the Borrelia can get into our blood and can cross the blood-brain barrier, but these worms actually can carry this Borrelia bacteria Lyme into the central nervous system like a Trojan horse. So Borrelia has been linked to multiple sclerosis. Even the MS Society talks a lot about it. On my masterclass training, I share a lot of studies linking Borrelia with MS. And so you'll be able to see that this is another source of Borrelia in the central nervous system for MS patients. And the picture speaks 1,000 words of all the chalky garbage from these worms. And they do cause a lot of damage as they move around in your spinal fluid. So why these worms are so hard to find in tissue is that once they do their damage, like they move, they don't just stay in one place. And so they move around, and like their tail can cause a lot of destruction, a lot of damage to the tissue. So by the time that the scientists want to examine in the brain tissue, the worm has moved on. Whereas in the spinal fluid, they can find these worms abundantly. The significance of this is that veterinarians have known for over 100 years that when these filarial worms are present in the central nervous system of domestic animals, so that would be horses and cattle, sheep, dogs, cats, a lot of different domestic animals, when they have these worms in their central nervous system, they have symptoms identical to multiple sclerosis. And this has been known since like 1952. There was an article written, and the huge insight that they shared. So this has been over 60 years, it's been ignored. And that researcher, he shared that in 1952, the researchers that wrote this study, they predicted that the animal model finding these filarial worms in multiple sclerosis patients, that could really set a precedent for human MS studies because they cause such similar symptoms to what we see in multiple sclerosis. So the balance issues, extreme fatigue, muscle weakness, and spasticity, and paralysis, all the symptoms that we see in MS and in other chronic diseases and other neurological diseases. So why has this never been discovered before? Like when they did this research in the 1960s, and they said, gee, this sounds a lot like MS. We should really study this in humans. Well, nobody has picked up this research until Dr. Alan McDonald did. So he is the first to look for live parasites in the central nervous system of MS patients, which is bizarre because we know the immune system is working really hard. We know that there's inflammation in multiple sclerosis. We know that inflammation is a response of the immune system fighting some kind of enemy, which is usually most likely some type of microbe or parasite. So why wouldn't they look for parasites in the central nervous system? It is so beyond me. And Dr. Alan McDonald is the first. That's why I keep saying that we should nominate him for Nobel Prize for sure, because he did this like on a very conservative budget for research too. So it's not that this research will cost astronomical amounts of money. It's that nobody's interested in doing this research because sure, they find worms in the central nervous system. So what are we going to do? Are we going to cure multiple sclerosis with parasite drugs that are non-patentable, that aren't going to generate a lot of income? Who's going to fund this research? We have a huge dilemma on our hands. So in treating, what's really important that when we're working with our practitioner, you've got to work with somebody when you do this, but it's very important that you use the proper treatments at the right dosages, and also to understand that we want to make sure we avoid Herxheimer reactions in the central nervous system, which could be fatal, right? If these worms are dying in the central nervous system, or they're responding and they're fighting back, and we get a lot of damage in the central nervous system. So some doctors will prescribe a steroid maybe on the 3rd and 4th day of treatment, just when the parasites are starting to die, because the parasites have many ways that they make themselves blind to our immune system. And so when they start to die, the immune system goes, oh my gosh, there's parasites here. The enemy is here. We've got to go after it. And when we get symptoms, it's always the immune system responding to something. So it's kind of waking up and going after them. And that can be a die-off reaction. And so we have to be really, really careful that we do not get a strong Herx reaction in the central nervous system. So this is something that is really important that we treat. Again, with multiple sclerosis, we're dealing with dysbiosis. We have more than one type of parasite involved. I'm going to talk next week about the Lyme infections, about all the research linking MS and Lyme. And also, I might just put Lyme and the protozoa together because they're kind of linked anyhow with when you're talking about babesia or malaria, which are very similar. So I might just link those together because I know we're getting closer to like Thanksgiving and holidays and things like that. And I really want to cover these topics before we go into the holidays. So I'm going to go over to the slides right now because a picture is worth 1,000 words, or 1,000,000 words in this case. Okay, I'll just head over here. All right. So let's look at some pictures of the small filarial roundworms that Dr. Alan McDonald found. Again, when these worms are present in animals, they cause all the symptoms of multiple sclerosis, the extreme fatigue, the balance issues. So this is a picture of filarial, like an egg of the filarial worm. So these are all pictures that Dr. Alan McDonald took. There's a really great short, it's like a 15-minute lecture that you can listen to him sharing all of this research. That is on our website, livediseasefree.com. In the main menu on the homepage, there is research, and you can click on that and go down to parasites, and you'll see a direct link to his video there. So this is an actual picture of a worm egg in the spinal fluid of multiple sclerosis. Then also the zygote, which is the developing filarial worm. And then here is a little worm in the MS. This is all in the spinal fluid, so in a coil shape. This is a cluster of filarial worms, so all together hanging out, having a good time in the spinal fluid of MS. This is all in multiple sclerosis. This is a close-up of a worm, a filarial worm in the brain of MS patient. This is an image of 2 worms that are mating, so filarial worms that are mating. And again, this one is 3 filarial worms that are mating in the central nervous, in the spinal fluid of MS patients. And then this is really fascinating because the red arrows point to one worm and the blue arrows point to another worm. And you can see all this green lit up. It's like fluorescent green light lit up. And that signifies the DNA. So that's a dye that is attracted to the DNA of Borrelia, which is the spirochete, the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. So again, these worms, they cause enough damage on their own. They're way bigger than Borrelia. So when they're scooting around in our central nervous system, they can cause a lot of damage to our brain tissue, to our nerves, but they also bring in Borrelia, and maybe other parasites. He didn't look for any others. He's a specialist with Borrelia. He's been studying Borrelia in Alzheimer's and many other conditions. And I've shared actually where this spirochete can actually get into the myelin sheath. It's been found in the myelin sheath of Alzheimer's patients. So if it's in multiple sclerosis and we know that it likes to hang out in the myelin sheath, then why wouldn't it hang out in our myelin sheath also? So again, this just really shows that it's not our immune system attacking our nerve tissue, but in fact, it's literally these types of parasites that are getting into the central nervous system and causing like direct and indirect damage to our myelin, to our nerves, causing inflammation. So this is so huge, and it drives me crazy that his research has not been spread far and wide. And again, like when you look at all the symptoms that I mentioned at the start, how it can cause, different types of skin rashes, and it can cause changes in pigmentation of the skin, and it can cause arthritis and an abdominal pain and fatigue, tingling, and more than neurological symptoms when they get in the central nervous system. So fatigue, tingling, numbness, balance issues, spasticity, weakness, and paralysis. That's when these worms are in the central nervous system. And that's what Dr. McDonald found. So this is like taking research they've known for many, many years in the animal world and knowing that when these worms get in the central nervous system of animals, then they cause all these MS symptoms. And it's not just MS. I've worked with students with different neurological diseases that have many of these symptoms too, and they could easily have these filarial worms. So yes, it's found in MS. We haven't looked at it in other neurological diseases. It could easily be there also. So him and his team are the first to actually look at the spinal fluid and look for parasites at the time of the patient's death. So let us talk now about his more recent, so that was 2016, he published that information. And then in 2021, he published findings about, it's called novel brain compartment tapeworm larva in multiple sclerosis. So again, in 100% of MS patients, he found tapeworm larvae. So I've done talks on this before, how tapeworm, yes, they live in our intestine as a worm. Then they're babies, they're larvae. They move out of the intestine. They move into our blood. They move into our tissues. They cause cysts, and it's called cysticercosis. If they move into the central nervous system, it's called neurocysticercosis. It's well documented in science. He found them in every single brain studied in the central nervous system of every MS subject that he looked at. And so 10 out of 10 again, that was the larva. But he also found in 2 out of the 10, he found developing tapeworms, not just the little babies, the little tiny babies in sacs in the cyst form, but he also found actual worms that were developing, which is crazy. So I just wanted to share that with you before I go back to the slides, because that's really important. And so juvenile segmented worms up to 323 microns. And then, so like with tapeworms, they have these hooklets that they hold on. And so he found those and the larvae. So let's go over to those pictures here. Hopefully I have them on here. Okay, that's the chalk going back to the filarial worms. This is the debris in the central nervous system. Like, look at how dirty that looks. Why aren't they looking for this? So let's look at the tapeworms he found in multiple sclerosis. So these are just a bunch of images of the developing larvae. So those little like hooklets and the immature form. the developing form. And again, they really like to live in like a cyst, like a little sac, like a little bladder. I actually watched a video one time of I think a veterinarian was taking one of those little sacs out of the brain. I believe it was a sheep, and they like cut the brain open and pulled it out. It was like a little bladder, and pulled it out and then closed the sheep up, and the animal was able to walk again and acted normal, which is crazy. So you can imagine the pressure that it puts on in the brain when you have this like thing growing, this bladder growing. There's the developing tapeworm. Incredible. Why has he not been nominated? You guys need to go and nominate him for a Nobel Prize. I'm not sure how we could do that, but that's something we should do as a community, because when you actually help him to get credit for the amazing work he's done, that helps to get this out to the world, right? It helps to have more and more people aware, because many of us have, we might have migraines, or we might start to get different neurological symptoms for years before we get a diagnosis of a neurological disease. And that is a lot of these different types of worms and the larvae in the central nervous system. Not only them, it can be other bacteria like Borrelia and others, but this is really significant. All right, I'm going to go back to here and see if you guys have any questions. Before I go to that, I just wanted to share that with our students, like we've learned about the filarial worms, we've learned about tapeworms. So obviously, if we have tapeworm in the central nervous system, we have tapeworms, the worms, in our digestive tract, in our intestines. And yes, sure enough, we do. So on our blog post on livediseasefree.com, it'll be the more recent one that I'll be publishing either Friday or Monday this week. Go to livediseasefree.com and you'll be able to see a lot more of the pictures of the worms. I have personally passed a very, very large worm, over 2 feet long. I have passed a lot of flukes. So our students are passing a lot of liver and intestinal flukes. And it's really important to know what they look like. They look like they're rubbery. They're almost see-through. They're white. They have a tail on them that's more translucent. They cause so much inflammation. Maybe they cause more than the filarial worms. I don't know. I know flukes cause a lot of inflammation. And our students are passing many, many of these flukes. And it's like when you try to see what a fluke looks like online, there's virtually no pictures of flukes. And they have like maybe 1 or 2 cartoon images. I found one real picture of the liver of some kind of, it was like an elk maybe, and that liver was infected with flukes. But that's it. It's like there are so many people infected with flukes, whether it's blood flukes, which are smaller. They are like around 1 inch long or less. Then we have liver flukes, and we have intestinal flukes, and we can have pancreatic flukes. There's many different cousins of them, and they're they're a flatworm. They're related more to the tapeworm. I didn't put the pictures up here because people can get quite squeamish, and I don't know if Facebook or YouTube they're going to be upset with me for posting those pictures. But you can find them on our website. You can also go to, just trying to see where I put the link. So MS is an infectious disease, part 3, filarial worms and MS. You can just even do a Google search of live disease-free and multiple sclerosis and filarial worms, and you'll probably find 2 or 3 different times I've talked about them, and you'll see pictures of them. You can also do a Google search of live disease-free roundworms in MS, and then you can actually see some pictures that I posted. I have literally thousands of worm pictures from my students, like thousands. It's very common for somebody to have several hundred worms in them. Yes, several hundred. Maybe they're not all 2 feet long, but maybe they're 6 inches or 8 inches or 12 inches. And there might be a few that are bigger. The flukes can be, anywhere between 3 inches to 6 inches at the maximum, maybe 4 to 5 at maximum at the most. And so it's just super common. And of course, that the bigger the parasite we pass, the greater the symptom improvement we can have, because they can cause a lot of symptoms, especially the flukes. They cause a lot of inflammation. They cause edema. They're really linked with cancer too. So, and I've done a blog post on parasites in cancer. So you can look right now, even before, if you don't want to wait, you can actually go to our Live Disease. It's a library there. You'll love it. The blog, which is my articles that I write. And there's my notes. You can just scan them, or you can look at the shortened video version. You can listen to it while you're making supper. But you can actually find one on flukes and one on roundworms. I don't know if I published one on tapeworms yet, but I will be doing that. Tapeworms are more flat, and they're like a ribbon, and they're segmented, and they are longer than flukes. So flukes are wider and shorter. They might be like a centimeter wide, and they might be 3 to 6 or 5 centimeters long maximum. And so they're wider and shorter in length, whereas the tapeworms are going to be more skinny. They might be just 2 or 3 millimeters wide, and then they can be very long. Maybe a really big tapeworm could be maybe 1 centimeter. That's pretty big. Usually probably smaller, but the width of them. But they can be very long. But they are very characteristic because a roundworm looks more like a spaghetti noodle, and the tapeworms look more like they're like really flat and ribbon and segmented. And they require different medication to treat. And there is not one parasite drug that will cure you of flukes. It's not that easy. We take a combination of usually like 3 or 4 parasite drugs at pretty significant doses with oxygen therapies plus herbs, plus being ready to treat at the start. And I talk all about that in the Live Disease-Free plan, where we stop feeding the infection so much, we decrease their favorite food, which is sugar and carbohydrates. Then we start to support the body so that we can tolerate the treatments. And then we really build a plan based on what we energy test well for, what parasites we're passing, what our diagnosis, what our symptoms are. We use about 6 criteria, and then we start to get energy tested. And so then we build a plan of which parasite treatments are most helpful. And it's very, very important you work with someone because they're not easy to get rid of. They're really not. Maybe in time we'll find different protocols, but we're using what's safe, what's recognized. And it's very important that, number one, you do not hurt your liver or your kidneys. Those are organs that you need to keep. And it's very important that you use enough of the right treatments, or else the parasites become resistant, and then these treatments are never going to work for you in the future. So there are a lot of people that are really desperate. They know they're dealing with parasites. It makes so much sense. And then all these forms of like, take this and this drug and it's going to cure everything. And no, it does not. So there's a big craze of, ivermectin and fenbendazole, and people are trying it, and I have no idea what dosages they're taking, but just between you and I, like the doctors that I work with, and even our students that get energy tested, fenbendazole is not commonly prescribed, not because it's bad, it's just not very effective. And ivermectin will only treat certain types of parasites. If you have flukes or tapeworms, it's not going to treat them at all. So it's really important that you use the right treatments at safe, effective doses, but that you're ready to treat before you start treating. All right, I'm going to go to a couple of questions. Hi, Susan. What about clicking throat? Some okay, going through a terrible time, can't sleep. You have clicking in your throat. I've heard of clicking in your ears. I haven't heard of clicking in your throat. So what I would first do, and you get a high-pitched sound ringing. Sorry, maybe that's in your ear. So if you have like these kind of symptoms, it sounds like inflammation, right? Inflammation is your immune system is working really hard to try to eradicate an enemy. It's kind of like when the war is out of control, the enemy needs support. So number one, diet is the first thing. Get your carbs really low, between 30 to 40 total grams of carbs per day. You can get our Live Disease-Free diet guidelines free on our website, livediseasefree.com. Go to the main menu under research. You will see there that you'll have all the guidelines there. So get your carbs down. You've got to, this person has, I don't know if it's you or he, you said he, so it is maybe your husband or partner or family member. If he's not getting enough sleep, he's going to get weaker and weaker, right? And then the parasites become stronger and we become more disabled. So it's very important that, like, I can't recommend any medication because I don't know anything about him, but Some of this is something you can talk to your doctor about, like over-the-counter sleep aids, like it's called Nitol, but the active ingredient is just Benadryl. That can be helpful. It does help to sedate parasites, but you have to check to see what other medications you're on, just to make sure it's not going to cause negative adverse effects. It's usually pretty safe. Very low breathing. The doctor told him Benadryl, should be, if the doctor said that, then that should be totally fine. The breathing part is, all of this is connected, right? And it's not just one parasite he's dealing with. So remember, when you have a garden, whether it's a flower bed or whether it's a vegetable garden, you don't just have one type of weed that moves in, one type of pest. And it's the same in our digestive tract and what moves into our body. So our students typically have these worms I'm talking about, but they also have bacteria like Clostridia and Borrelia and different types of bacteria that are pathogenic. They also have different protozoa, things like malaria or babesia and others. They could have Giardia. They also have fungus, so Candida can be a really big problem. But then also, if some people are living in a moldy home, they might have mold in them, growing in them also, from the mold spores they've been inhaling. So they're dealing with the mycotoxins and the fungi and the bacteria and worms and protozoa. So he's getting really, really significant warning signs now. So it's really important that you find a practitioner that understands, that talks like me. And if you can't find a practitioner, you're more than welcome to work with us. Just make sure to watch my masterclass training. And there I share all the steps we take to get well, like getting ready to treat, supporting the body. He should be feeling a lot better before he starts treating. Otherwise, he's not going to do well with treating. And then to really build a treatment plan that's catered to you, I help you access the practitioners, whatever testing, very little testing we need to do, just basically making sure that we're energy tested if possible. Not everyone can do that, but in most places in the developed countries, we can. But like Susan, these are really strong warning signs, so please take this seriously. Watch my masterclass training. Watch some, like go onto our website, livediseasefree.com, go through the blog, look at the titles. And then if you kind of go like, oh my gosh, like she really knows what she's talking about, and you need support, because even when you want to get support from your doctor, even if they want to help you, they don't have a lot of experience. Remember, that's what I discovered. And it's no different today. It's so sad. There are a small number of practitioners that are curious and they're starting to be interested in it, but they do not have the experience to identify and to develop a treatment plan other than just doing the Lyme infections and Candida, right? Or they might put you on herbs for the parasites, for the worms, but they're not enough and they're not going to do it. So, brown eyes, can parasites cause irritable bowel syndrome? Yes. Inflammatory bowel syndrome, irritable bowel, celiac. Yes, that's what's going on. That's what's causing the inflammation. And if you don't treat them in your gut, then again, the larvae over time, they move into your blood, they move into your tissue, they can cause cysts, even in things like your shoulder or different areas. Like some like to live in reproductive organs or in your knee, like the cartilage. They like to live inside of the joints. Some like to live in the central nervous system. So it's bad enough when you have tapeworms and roundworms and flukes in your gut, but it's much worse when they cross the central nervous system. They can cause tumors. And then when you have this big tumor growing in your head, then it's really more scary to use the parasite drugs because you don't want to cause a strong Herx reaction. Then it's almost better if they can cut it out, because, it could be deadly if you don't, so this is why please be careful. Like if you have seizures or if you possibly have a tumor in the brain, don't mess around with parasite drugs. You really have to do it safely, where your doctor can order some steroids like on the 3rd and 4th day is recommended. And that way it kind of quiets the immune system down. So when the parasites are dying, it's not going to just overreact. Because of course it's like, oh my gosh, there's the enemy. Like, look at the enemy. We've got to go after it. We've got to kill it. And that kind of an overreaction can be deadly for people. So Paul, you stripped your stomach lining using Mimosa pudica. That is a type of herb. It's from a plant. Anyone trying to get rid of parasites, use wormwood or prescription or pepper or dill or something else. So Mimosa pudica is fine to use. We don't really use it. It's not super helpful. But again, when people don't know what they're doing, even herbs, which are natural medicines, they can cause a lot of damage. Even things like wormwood, right? And so you have to be really like understanding and knowledgeable. Like once you learn the skill, you'll have it forever, because you should periodically treat parasites. You should be treating them, I would say, especially if you've had a history of parasites, you should treat them at least every 6 months to 1 year. Or if you've had chronic disease you've recovered from, maybe every 3 months, 4 months, depending on especially your exposure to parasites too. So really important that you don't just wing it. It's not worth it. It doesn't work. And herbs are natural medicines, and they can cause a lot of problems. So Rob, so basically it's impossible to get rid of them no matter how hard you try. No, like look at me. I've been living 35 years without multiple sclerosis. It's kind of like, can you have a garden without weeds? They're going to keep coming back, but if you control them, then you can live a very, very long, healthy, happy life. So the people that are in care homes that are in their, 70s, 80s, 90s, they are infested with parasites. And so if you get really good at managing that, you can stay out of those care homes for maybe 20, 30 years, right? Eventually we're all going to die. But if you could still be driving, skiing, being independent, a little wrinkled, but still being independent and living your life when you're, even 90 years old, instead of rotting in a care home, that's what I personally want to go for. So it's true, Rob, that parasites are part of life. It's just that you can't, it's just like viruses. If your immune system is really strong, you're hardly ever going to deal with a virus. But with parasites, they're on our produce, they're in our soil, they're in our pets, right? If you're in a restaurant, you literally have to live in a bubble to avoid all parasites. But when you decrease their presence in your body so much that you have high energy, good cognitive function, sleep really well, you have a lot of strength, then you manage that. And if you notice something shifts a little bit, or you're not sleeping as well, you have more gassy, that's when you start treating, not when you have neurological symptoms. And so, Mohammed, you did 3 days of Prazi last week. It was the hardest thing you did in your life. You weren't ready to treat, for sure. And so the big thing is, like, I don't know how much you took. I hope you're working with a practitioner. Like, our students are literally doing multiple cycles, 10 to 14 days of using 3 to 5 parasite drugs at a time to actually to actually treat well. All right. So it's just taking one parasite drug for 3 days is just going to strengthen the parasites. And if you felt really bad, then that's usually a sign that you aggravated parasites and didn't necessarily treat them. You said you had a lot of acid reflux throughout those 3 days. Yeah, so you weren't ready to treat. Our students don't have acid reflux. I don't know if you normally have acid reflux, but that's a sign of low stomach acid. That's a sign of, getting close towards having like H. pylori living in your gut, in your stomach. And then eventually people get GERD. So it's important that your diet is in the right place, your detox pathways are open, you're sleeping well, you're going through the checklist for healing, and you're feeling a lot better. And then we look to see what you energy test well for. And it's always a combination. There's not one of our students that just uses one drug to get well. If it was that easy, we could literally write a book and we would cure the world, but it's not. These parasite drugs are helpful. They're more helpful than just herbs, but they're not enough on their own. Hi, Lorraine. So who diagnoses the type of worm? Do you know? There is no doctor that will, unfortunately. So the way that we are figuring out our treatment plan is based on our health history, like the health history of our parents, like what kind of symptoms, diseases they've had, also also the diagnoses that which we have had, the symptoms that we're dealing with, because there's very specific symptoms for different types of parasites. Then also the types of worms we're passing. So we're doing oxidizing enemas, which is a oxygen type enema that's releasing the parasite. So this is where when you go on our blog post this weekend and you look, or it'll be Monday maybe, under the most recent, it'll look for worms in MS, that article, and there you will see pictures of what our students are passing. And that's through the oxidizing enemas. And when people do those enemas, it's really helpful because we can see if it's a short, fat and wide fluke versus a long, skinny spaghetti noodle, that would be a roundworm, versus flat, ribbon-shaped, segmented, longer and more narrow, flat, which is a tapeworm. So that's really helpful. And then we get energy tested. So that our students are taking like one dose of the common parasite drugs to a practitioner, like either a naturopath or functional medicine doctors could be trained in this, but it's more so usually naturopath or chiropractor that does some kind of energy testing. So they should not know what they're testing. You should just bring it in blind, like one sample, one dose in each baggie. You label it 1, 2, 3, 4, so you know what it is, but they don't. And then they hold it into your energy field with either a machine or they use advanced muscle testing, and they'll be able to tell, does this treatment restore your energy, bring balance to you? They'll go yes, no, yes, no. They'll give you a list of which ones tested well for you. That is more helpful. So instead of trying to figure out which worms you have, you're looking to see which treatments test the best for you. And if you, let's say, you test well for 3 treatments that treat roundworms, then you probably have roundworms. Or maybe you test well for 3 or 4 treatments that treat flatworms, then you probably have flatworms. So if our students really start passing and they start noticing, well, I have a lot more flukes, then they're going to use different treatments, combinations versus somebody who has a lot of really big roundworms. So the roundworms can be 6 inches, 8 inches, easily over 2 feet, the large ascaris, and it's really common. Like it's really, really common to pass hundreds of worms when you're feeling really bad, when you're dealing with chronic disease. So that's how we would build a treatment plan for the types of treatments we have. Hello, Paul. Does anyone know the name of the podcast hosted by a man or a woman couple? I don't know. Not sure. I have no idea. Oh, using high doses of Mimosa pudica. I don't know, Paul, if you're the one who said, yeah, I don't know who they are, but be really careful who you're listening to. Like Paul, I don't know if you listen to them. Maybe that's where, because you said you were using high doses and they're the ones that told you about Mimosa pudica. So please be careful, be really, really careful. Like don't just listen to what people say and try things and wing it, because like this one person in the chats, he's like, it really stripped my stomach lining, and that's just using a herb. Never mind the parasite drugs. The parasite drugs are going to be stronger. So your mom is 77 and her heart condition, she has a heart condition and a pacemaker now. That really means that there is some type of parasite that is impacting her heart and her cardiovascular. Hannah, if I work with you, will I be given specific instructions on parasite treatment? Yes, Hannah. So with my students, I help them to get ready to treat. I make sure that they're following the plan properly. I check up. I'm a background as a teacher. I'm a certified teacher. I have a science degree. I'm a certified teacher. I've been coaching for 20 years with students, helping them to recover from chronic. We've got a lot of people, hundreds, thousands of people that have recovered by now. So number 1, we make sure that you're ready to treat. And then number 2 is we look at those 6 criteria and we help you to build a treatment plan. And so because a lot of doctors, like if they're going to prescribe something, then they don't really know like what combinations are tolerated well, what is going to be more a synergistic, better killing effect, what people tolerate. That's a big thing, right? So we know because we work, and it's really important for us to make sure that you're ready. We want to avoid a Herxheimer reaction as much as possible. And you can do that if you do the prep work, which means that when you do the prep work, you'll start feeling better. than you do now. And then when you start treating, you should just feel better and better and better. We should not be feeling so sick that we're laying on the couch like we were hit by a truck. There's no benefit in Herx reactions, right? And so that's why it's really important to treat the parasites, but in a way that you can continue to live your life and you're just feeling better all the time. Last question here. What do you mean by energy testing? Rob is asking. So this is something that has been known for many years, is that every living thing, plants and animals, we all have this energy field around us. And certain things will impact our energy field. So infections, toxins can make our energy field weaker. And so when we bring a remedy into the energy field that is helpful for us, it usually shows up as strengthening us or making us more balanced. And they can pick this up with very subtle changes with either a machine, or they can use like an advanced muscle testing where they're skilled and they use it in their practice every day, and they can pick up very subtle changes in your strength by bringing in a remedy that's helpful. So it is not an exact science. We don't go solely on that premise. We look at all the 6 criteria, but it is something that can be helpful. It's like it can be a helpful tool if the practitioner uses this in their practice every day and they do a lot of they have a lot of experience. They have a really, look at their Google reviews if they have a good reputation. And so then they can tell you which of the, and herbs too, which of the treatments that you brought in are testing well for you. And it can change, but you should have a very good idea of what you test well for if it's a good practitioner. And again, we always make sure that it is consistent. I mean, we've had one practitioner that is just you test well for ivermectin and fenbendazole. And I'm like, then I get my spidey senses go up already. I'm like, I don't know. Because number one, if somebody has MS, that's usually not a protocol people test well for. And then it kind of sounds like what everybody else is prescribing on the internet right now, which is not helping. It is, yes, fenbendazole has a place for specific types of cancer. There's one, I think Joe Tippins, he did really well with fenbendazole. It's not even a huge amount, but he has a special type of cancer, and it works really well for that. But for a lot of other parasites, it's not the best treatment. So that's what energy testing is all about. So it is really important to understand that, yes, we have to treat the Lyme infections. We definitely have to treat fungus, candida, and mold, and also different types of bacteria like the Borrelia and Clostridia has been linked. And there's many other different small parasites that are linked with multiple sclerosis. But today we focused on the worms, and they are the biggest problem. They are the biggest parasite. And if you can compare a little bacteria to a 2-foot worm, what do you think is going to cause the most symptoms in you, right? Of course, if the bacteria is causing inflammation on your myelin, on a nerve, then yes, that's going to cause symptoms. But the parasites, the big worms, the flukes, they will cause a lot more damage. They cause a lot more inflammation. And remember, I've talked about this highway of nerves between your gut and your brain. It's called the gut-brain axis. And so many of the symptoms that we feel, it's not because of the lesions in the central nervous system. It could be, but very often it's from the parasite activity in your gut, the worms in your gut. And again, you might be shocked at how many worms you have in you. It's hundreds for a lot of people that I work with. It's very common when you're diagnosed or not even diagnosed with MS, or they're close, they have they're looking for, trying to get a diagnosis from a doctor. They suspect they're going to have some kind of neurological disease, and they're just passing literally hundreds of worms. Could be 200, could be 400. It's really shocking. You think, how can we be alive when we have that many worms? So Rob, you spent thousands of dollars all over the world. Nobody's been able to help. Nobody knows. Why don't you just look at the work we do, watch my masterclass training. You can fill out the form. You can go to, and then you'll be able to listen to the coach-a-thon. You'll see all the steps. I just share everything that we do, right? And I'm hoping that, practitioners are going to, and this is where the next phase of our company is really to support practitioners in sharing everything that we've learned, because you're right. Nobody is doing this. It's absolutely horrible. All right, so I'm going to let you guys go. So next week, I'm going to be talking about other types of parasites that are linked with multiple sclerosis. And again, this is like 100 years of research. So what I'm sharing with you is not new research. Yes, what Dr. Alan McDonald did was 2016, 2021, but the research where they actually found these worms in the central nervous system of animals, of domestic animals, and they know that that these worms can infect humans, right? And they do infect humans, and we would expect to have the same symptoms. Nobody has studied this since that time. Incredible, since the 1950s, early 1950s, so brutal. So if you feel that this research needs to get out, please help us to get the word out by liking, sharing, and subscribing. And then if you're at that place where you're like, Pam, this makes so much sense, you can either watch our blog, go to the blog post on livediseasefree.com, look at my articles, just scan the notes. Then if you're like, okay, I need to treat parasites, I need a plan, watch my masterclass training. You'll see the video right below this. You'll see the link for the video right below this video. And on my masterclass training, I talk about more detail of the research, the steps we take to recover, a lot of case studies. And if you want successes, go to our YouTube or even Live Disease Free website, and you can listen to the videos of people that have taken our program. It's been life-changing for them. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.